But what I'm trying to do is not engage everybody as if you bite me, then there's going to be this really harsh response. I would rather just gray rock some of that and just be like, yeah, they're going to move on to something else. And you're going to be misunderstood. I bet if we looked under the hood of anybody who's the most fearsome critic, you'll probably find some stuff going on in there as well. But I don't need to tend to their fire. I'm tending to my fire.
Bob, welcome back to the podcast. It's been a few years, but it's great to see you.
Yeah, thanks a million, Chris. Good to be with you.
Yeah, well, hey, the last time we talked, you shared about starting an airline. Catch us up. You always have a great story to share, and I thought it'd be fun just to do a fun catch-up with you because, like I said, you and Maria are always doing stuff.
We're moving in a lot of different directions. The most recent thing that we're up to, we're just back from Uganda, and we're taking these 1,500 kids in one of the 14 countries that Love Does has schools now. But this one country, Uganda, and then one school within Uganda, we're building a university right next to it. And when I say we, it's like we're the concierge that's in the lobby of the hotel. People say what they want, and we just say, how can we be helpful in making that happen? And so a lot of terrific people see the value of education for these kids. So we're the concierge and say, we'll make that happen. And then this trip was to start securing giraffes. And we don't want to just have a university. We're aiming for, we got room for 6 giraffes in a giraffe habitat. So we're building that around the university. So we wanted something that didn't bite people and wouldn't get away. So, or if they get away, they can't be hidden for long. So, yeah, so that's it. So that's the mischief that we're up to right now.
That's really good, Bob. You know, I think the focus of this conversation today is going to be around just how hope fuels life and the value of joy in our lives. But I want to start here. Proverbs says that hope deferred makes the heart sick. I know there are a lot of folks listening today, Bob, who are bruised, disappointed, and a little cynical, if I'm being honest. How do we get ourselves out of that place?
Yeah, I like that you chose the word cynical because the founder of cynicism, it was a guy named Diogenes. And Diogenes lived in a water barrel of all things. He made his own clothes, as did all the early cynics. And if I had met them, I would have joined. I would have been like, I'm in. You live a little bit apart from society. You don't go with what's fashionable. But the thing about Diogenes, you'll never see a painting with him in it where he's not holding a lamp. And what Diogenes would do each day is he would go through Athens at high noon with his lamp lit. And people would say, Diogenes, it's high noon. What are you doing? And he said, I'm looking for virtue. And so I think there's something beautiful that we could look for virtue, even in the middle of some of the angstiest conversations. So of all the vitriol, that we could look for virtue. And so I want to go old school cynic. New school cynics are grousing about price of tuna and what Southwest Airlines is doing and all that. But old school cynics are looking for virtue. And I think if we were doing that wherever you are in your faith, whether faith guides your steps as it does mine, or whether you're just looking from a safe distance, someone I would call church adjacent. They're just like watching all the crazy going on and saying, my goal is to get as little of the crazy on me as possible. If we start looking for virtue, you'll find virtue even in the crazy activities, even in all the insecurity played out. You'll see there's something virtuous underneath all of that off-putting negativity and all that. The virtue is that there's some different views, and that evidently that's appealing to some other people. And so a more virtuous way of seeing that is that those views really land with people for these reasons, because they hope the best for their family and the ones they love. As soon as I get past all the crazy and start going old school Diogenes, then I can get there. But if I go with my first reaction, we do. I mean, I picked juries in a former life when I was a lawyer, and you'd say, you're in, you're out, you're in, you're out. You make quick judgments on people. That's what you do. That's what we all do. On average, each of us makes 33,000 decisions a day. We say, is this place safe? Is this person safe? Is that worth my time? Is that thing? And so that's just and we're making these things. It's like quantum computing. You're like making zillions of these things all at the same time. And so what happens in making these decisions is that sometimes we lose our way. And sometimes even people in faith communities helping other people find their way, we lose our way because we try to control instead of influence. To say, I would rather influence, not manipulate, but influence somebody by showing examples of things. Here's an example of this. I'm not trying to talk people into or out of faith. I just want to point towards these beautiful examples and the things that I've learned. Whether it's from a dead guy named Diogenes or an alive guy named Billy, I want to point towards some of those examples, find the virtue, and talk about that.
You are giving us a masterclass right now, Bob, in relationship skills. If we're looking for virtue, does that require us to have the muscle of knowing how to let go of self-protection then?
I don't know if we have to let go, because I feel like I can, and I'm a student of these things. I'm sounding like a professor of right now, so I'm still learning these things. But that instinctive like self-protection, I think we want to learn and grow from our circumstances. I mean, you've got one caveman living in one cave all alone. The other caveman next to him has a pet. It's a T-Rex, and he goes and pets it on the nose every day. And then all of a sudden, that other caveman isn't there anymore. And the T-Rex has a big grin on his face. So the other person learns from their observed experiences, don't pet dinosaurs. Like that's not a power move. And so I want to learn and grow from the things that are going on around me, but I don't want to be scarred by them. I got there's a camp in the boat that the kids all arrive on. The 400 high school kids arrive, and then they've got 800 pieces of luggage for like 4 days and 3 nights. So it just cracks me up, all the luggage they bring. And so I have a landing craft, and the camp boat broke, so I was there with a landing craft, like offloading the luggage every week. And I got this huge bag in the shoulder. And I don't know what that girl, how long she thought she was fleeing her country or something, but it was at least 150 pounds. And it just tweaked something in my shoulder. This was 18 weeks ago. And I've been favoring my shoulder for 18 weeks. And what happens is that now it's kind of atrophied because I don't use it anymore. And if you think about that in self-protection, we get wounded and then we start favoring, well, we got wounded because it hurts to use it. And so then we start atrophying because we're not using it because we were hurt. And I want to understand at some point, what kind of a fix do we need? Is this the time is going to take some going to be the best healer? Or is this something where you need a number 10 scalpel to get in there and do something? And I don't know the difference. So what I did is I asked somebody, and they said, they put you in the MRI and they take all their pictures. And then, you know what he said? Could go either way. I'm like, darn it. I was looking for an answer. And this is so much of life. Like what we do, though, is we don't say, well, I'm just going to throw up my hands and not engage anymore. Instead, to say, listen, I want to learn from my lived experiences. I want to learn from the experiences that are around me. We all get a little beat up and hurt around the edges. When we do, I don't want to favor that hurt so much that I make a rule. Like if you remember in high school or junior high school, you liked somebody a lot, Sally or whoever it was, and then they broke up with you. They said, over lunch, it's over. And so you make some silly rule like, I'll never love again. But that rule helped you at the time with your fragile little heart. It was like scaffolding to hold you together. But then later you're 20 and you can't get a date and you wonder why. It's because you have a stupid rule, which is that I'll never love again. So what you did is because you got all of that relationship in the shoulder and you made a rule and it's not serving you any longer. And I don't know if it was true at the time but it isn't true anymore. So what happens, we make these rules. And then once we have a rule, then you make a decision about how you're going to interact with people. If you think everyone's going to leave you, then you never go deep. Why? Because the rule is everybody's going to leave you. it isn't true, but it feels true. And so now you don't go deep with anybody, and then you carp about how your relationships are non-existent. It's because you're an inch deep. So I guess I just want us to, with a lot of kindness and patience with ourselves, just evaluate, hey, what are some of the rules that I made? Well, what was the thing that I took in the shoulder? And have I been staying away from that? If you make a rule that people, because you met somebody in a faith community that was mean, if you make this rule that people in faith communities are not to be trusted, well, that's a bit of an overgeneralization, and you're going to miss out on a lot of the good beauty that is there. So I just want us to be pausing before we make new rules, and then maybe have a little time to explore some of the rules you've made. And just, could I go a little bit more Diogenes on those? Could I find more virtue? When I find the virtue, what it ends up doing is taking down the scaffolding around rules that aren't helpful.
Yeah, how do you, just tactically, Bob, begin to take down this ego scaffolding when we've lived with these reflexes, your words, these rules for so long that they become our new normal, even though they're not aiming our lives in a direction toward fulfillment, purpose, joy, whimsy even?
Yeah, maybe see where you took a shot, even just around with my closest friends. We've been talking about this concept. I don't know if it's a familiar one to you, but gray rocking. So a gray rock is
It's
just
not
where
actually,
you,
no.
yeah. If somebody like does something mean and points it in your direction, just gray rock it. Just don't. You don't need to respond to all that. Now, everything inside of you makes you want to go like, oh yeah, like, and then you'll go back to them, and now that just engages whatever it is that is now excited within them. Like, it just engages that more, instead of, I think there's some things that you can just gray rock. You don't need to just be non appealing. But there's another way to do this, is fugu. Fugu is this deadly fish. It's a delicacy in Asia, but also if you get touched by one of its spine, it kills you. So there's a lot of people that go full fugu on everybody. Like, they're just trying to be like so prickly and so deadly. And no doubt that is, and I wouldn't be smart enough nor presume to know what's going on in their complicated life, because I'm having difficulty figuring out what's going on in my complicated life. But what I'm trying to do is not engage everybody as if you bite me, then there's going to be this really harsh response. I would rather just gray rock some of that and just be like, yeah, they're going to move on to something else. And you're going to be misunderstood. I bet if we looked under the hood of anybody who's the most fearsome critic, you'll probably find some stuff going on in there as well. But I don't need to tend to their fire. I'm tending to my fire.
Earlier you were talking about throwing up our hands. I think about maybe perhaps burying our heads in the sand. And by the time this airs, we're past the election season, but I'll use that as a case study. How do we engage with people well, culture well, without embodying, as Jesus decried, the political spirit, the religious spirit?
Yeah, I wouldn't presume to know the answer to that, because I'm such a newbie at all these things. But what we can do is try to engage in ways that are consistent with who we are. So, for instance, I'm kind of an apolitical guy, but I was noticing that everybody up on Capitol Hill kind of hated each other's guts. So years ago, I got a house on Capitol Hill, right across the street from some of these institutions. And it was a place, there was no name out in front of it. There's no lights. There's no whatever. It was just a place where people could quietly gather and just be friends. That was it. I had a gal that made sandwiches for people. It was a really nice, it was kind of like the employee lounge. I did that for a number of years. And then they changed whatever rules govern those kinds of things, and we couldn't continue to do it. But I want to fail trying. I don't want to fail watching. So you can see some of these things going on and say, well, what's the part that I could have in this? And just jump in for your part. But you don't have to play everybody's part. Just to say your part. As for folks where Scripture guides their steps, Ephesians 4, live a life worthy of the calling you've received. So stop living everybody else's calling. Like, what's my unique piece on everything. And so sometimes you don't have a piece. I don't have a dog in that fight. I don't have a role to play in that dispute. And that's not chicken out. I'm a trial lawyer. I engage difficult things for a living. However, I don't need to engage everything for a living to say that sense of, hey, what's my piece of that? And sometimes the answer is, that's not yours. You've got other stuff. And so I think if we try to divine that, and it doesn't feel mystical to me, there's a sense of people talk about calling like it's a telephone call, but it's kind of a sense of, hey, does that inspire me? Does that use my giftedness, my particular opportunities, the influences that can have on people? Is that a good fit? Does that make me more leaning towards the legacy I want to have? Do I want to be known as this person or that person? I ended up chucking this law career, not because I didn't enjoy it. It was a lot of fun. But I just sensed that there was other things I was supposed to be doing instead. Think of Paul Revere. Paul Revere had a message, and most people think the message was the British are coming. But if you think about it, everybody was British at the time because the Revolutionary War hadn't happened. So, but having a message saying you're here, like, isn't as compelling. So he had a message, and Longfellow wrote the poem, and Longfellow messed up the message. But the concept is that there was a midnight ride. Here's the thing. Paul Revere didn't own a horse. And so what most people don't know, he had to go and borrow a horse, but he knew a guy with a horse. He was at church, and he had a really fast horse. So he borrowed a fast horse to get his important message to the right place. And here's the final thing. Paul Revere didn't ride alone, yet nobody knows who rode with him. There were two guys that rode with him that night. And so my point is this: know your message, get clear about your message. Don't have somebody convert your message into their message, right? Longfellow did that to Paul Revere's message. And then don't ride alone, and find the fastest horse you can ride. And controversy is not a fast horse in my stable. I'm just not going to swing at every pitch. I don't find that having spent a lifetime and a career being right for a living, I'm not trying to be right. I'm just saying, like, how could I start seeing virtue in the middle of this? And whether people, whether faith guides their steps, or they're all the above or none of the above, or feel kind of beat up by people in faith communities, what if we are just safe people in safe places? And we don't always nail it. I want to be a safe guy, but for some people, I must not be a safe guy. But I'm endeavoring to say, well, then what can I do to create a safer environment so people perceive what's in my heart, which is to create a safe place for people to thrive.
I love the nuance. I love this. Know your message, get clear on your message, and don't go alone. Bob, I love that. Is there any other domain of life that you think we could easily take that 3-step practice and apply it to for folks joined with us to say, you know what, this could actually up-level you as you move forward in life?
Yeah, I would say that we often think about that we call LCE, which is least creepiest explanation. So when things happen...
What do you mean?
It's easy to come up with the creepiest explanation. As I went down to turn on the coffee pot at 5 in the morning, and there's like dudes sitting on my back porch at 5 in the morning. There's like a guy sitting there. So I opened the door. I'm like, hello. And he said, I'm not a stalker. And I'm thinking all evidence to the contrary. But it would be easy to come up with the most creepiest explanation, like oh my gosh, and call the National Guard to get him. But to say, what if you said first the most generous explanation? So the most generous explanation, evidently he'd read a book, and there was a story about somebody who got engaged on the back porch, and he thought, I just wanted to experience what it would be like to be on your back porch. And I'm thinking in my thought bubble, you're going to experience a restraining order. But to think of the most generous explanation, and then say, what is the most realistic explanation? And the most realistic explanation is this brother needs to work on his people skills a little bit. Like you just don't hop somebody's fence and end up on their back porch. Because it can have some alternate endings that would not work out well for him. So what's the most realistic? What's the most generous explanation? What's the most realistic explanation? And then say, what is the most optimistic explanation? And to say the most optimistic explanation might be that maybe I'll meet him someday. We'll have a good laugh about it. Because it was pretty weird. So do the same when you meet people. That some woman showed up wearing a boa. I don't mean like feathers from the 50s. I mean like a reptile. That was like 7 feet long, wrapped around her neck. And she walked into this place that I was speaking and sat in the front row. And I'm not a snake guy, and I was freaking out. I was like, yeah, I was like, oh heavens. And I thought the most generous explanation was that maybe she doesn't know. Like I thought maybe she ducked under a branch on the way into church and it wrapped around. I'm like, I'm not telling her. And then I thought, what is the most realistic explanation? It's a realistic explanation. She's got some bogeys. I don't know what they are. Or likes reptiles. I don't know what was going on, but evidently something by all appearances. And then the most optimistic explanation is that I hope that she had a really good time. Yeah. So if we go with the least creepiest explanation instead of the most creepiest explanation, somebody does something you don't understand. And so then you freak out and make up all these stories in your mind about how it was a near-death experience for you or them, or you're usually the one that it's about. So you make it a near-death experience. It was just a dude that jumped, wasn't thinking and got on my back porch. It was just a woman who I had a pet snake, kind of like, but what is not normative for me, I mean, she may be friends with Alice Cooper and he has lots of snakes. So like what, if you knew more of the backstory, then like we were talking before we started about this silly Red Sox hat, like people think I'm a baseball fan, but
Carol.
it's just me honoring Carol, who was a baseball fan. And 11 years later, she'd asked me to wear it and represent the Sox while she was in heaven. And so it's 11 years later. And so there's more going on underneath the hat than you would think. There's more going on underneath the off-putting behavior than we will know. There's more going on. And that's where you come up with the least creepiest explanation. What's most generous? What's most realistic? What's most optimistic?
I got to go here because I think you introduced us to Carol in Everybody Always, if I'm not mistaken. And, you know, I think that book's been out for 6 years, but I remember that like I remember my next door neighbor's name. I'm just curious, Bob, 6 years on or so, what are some of the lessons that you just picked up on from Carol, learned from Carol that really have shaped you today? I know she was hugely impactful in your life.
Yes, well, never make a deal with somebody who dies because then you can't renegotiate it. Evidently, you can renegotiate NAFTA if I'm reading the papers right, but you can't renegotiate that one. So make short-term deals. We never got to the fine print in that. It just seemed like such a neat thing at the time to do. And now I don't want to like renege on the deal. I went to her gravesite after the Sox won the World Series, so I'm told. Never watched a baseball game yet. And I just stood there. I'm like, Carol, could I stop wearing this stupid hat? And I was all ears. I wanted something, a leaf to follow or maybe one of those Forrest Gump, like feathers to come floating by. Nothing. Yeah, there's no butterfly like in Patch Adams. So I'm just wearing the hat. So one of the things that it reminds me to do is love my neighbor. Like that idea to love your neighbor, to find reminders that I wear a Mickey Mouse watch wherever I go. Sometimes I walk in a room and I'm the only guy smiling. I'm like, me and you, buddy. So surround yourself by reminders about things that matter and why you're doing what you're doing. Have these little mementos. I wear a mood ring. I don't talk about where I am. I talk about how I am. Find those things that are these reminders about that will get you more centered and cause you a little bit more deeper with people. And then maybe be a little bit more generous about some of the little picadillos of the people around you. Now I can say that and it's all great until somebody's mean to me. Then it feels like, then you want to throw all that out the window and say, hold my earrings. And so to remind yourself, just like, no, we're going to gray rock that. We don't need to make everything isn't Gettysburg.
I want to go right there, Bob. How do you tactically navigate disappointment, betrayal, without it creating a root of bitterness in your heart?
Oh, I'm figuring it out, every single day. Yeah, I would say I don't want to be kind of like Ananias and Sapphira. They said they were further along in the adventure than they actually were. And chilling words, like you haven't lied to men, you've lied to God. So I don't want to lie to God about this. I'm just trying to figure out, like when it comes up, is there a better response? Is there a better form of the argument? Is there a better? So what I'll do is tend to like write that out. I don't need to release that into the world, but I could write out like my particular angle on that and why I see it differently. Find a better form of the argument, and sometimes the best form of the argument is silence. To just not just wish them well on their adventure and move along. Like that's it. Instead of engaging it, and you obviously have a different perception of what was going on and why, and some expectations that were or were not met. But instead of trying to rehash all of that, maybe just move on. Be so in the present, that saying in the Deep South they used to be where your feet are. Don't be thinking about yesterday or tomorrow. But I have a friend that sends me an email at like 10 at night most nights and says, this is what's happening tomorrow. Isn't that great? So I don't think about what's happening 4 days from now. I just want to know what's happening tomorrow. And that has helped it. If you've gone to a dinner party and somebody's looking beyond you to somebody over your shoulder, that's what I was finding myself doing with the different things I had going on. Maybe you too. And by just knowing what's going on today, like then that is really helpful to me. It lets me be singular. If somebody called and said they wanted to meet, so I said like where I'm going to be, and evidently the guy showed up because he was sitting in the lobby, and so we had just a great little conversation. So I don't make appointments with people. I tell people where I'm going, and if they want to intersect that, I'll be on Tom Sawyer Island next Monday. So like I'll just let people know where I'm going to be. And if they're there, that's great. I'm telling you, I just bought back a third of my life. Instead of saying, do you want to have coffee? Yes. Where do you want to have it? This place. What time? That day. What day? What day? La, 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 la. 15 emails in, nobody's had a cup of coffee. So I just rather just say, this is what I'm going to bring your own, or we'll just have a caramel, or I'm looking at a jar of Starbursts. Like, let's just go eat those. Forget the coffee. Like, let's just skip the part where we do all the planning and just get to the important part where we do the talking.
Yeah, so what's the principle there?
Yeah, I just don't want to spend a lot of time on the logistics. Now, for some people, that's very life-giving, that they like to have it. They live more of an Excel spreadsheet and organize. That's not a lesser version. That's terrific for them. It's not terrific for me. And so finding people around you that know how to keep you with wanderlust, like to keep that focused, and then appreciating the giftedness that they bring and that you bring, and with that spontaneity that can bring a certain something. But all that yippee skippy without any organization is just chaos. And so finding a group of people that you travel together as a posse. Now that I'm shopping for giraffes, there's this idea of a collective noun, like a school of fish, a murder of crows, a herd of elephants. A bunch of giraffes, when they're on the move, it's called a journey. Isn't that great? So a journey of giraffes. And so I just want to be with a bunch of people that are sticking their neck out, that we're on this journey together, and that we're going to figure it out together. And that's been just delightful. I don't need to have the whole plan. And yet there can be an overarching direction that I'm moving. Like just thinking about legacy, thinking about what's going to outlast me, thinking about the things that matter and the things that will slip away. Today's dispute with somebody is going to go away. Like there's just the half-life of most disputes out there are pretty short. If there's some healing that can happen, some learning that can happen, that's great. Let's do those things, but let's not get wrapped around the axle.
I want to put a pin in talking about legacy. It's so fascinating you brought that up. I want to go back to that analogy you carved out for us when you're looking over the shoulder of someone at a restaurant, and talk about distractions. Like if distractions were really easy to spot and call out for what they are, at least I think I would deal with them quicker. I know I'm not the only one. How do we get better at identifying distractions so we don't, in your case, spend $3,000 on a 25-cent problem?
Yeah, you could chunk it up a little bit. As a lawyer, you used to keep track of our time in 6-minute increments. Like, what'd you do every 6 minutes? Point one. And so what you would do for like, gosh, decades is keep track of what you were doing. You're helping this person, then working on this and working on this, working on this. What if you were to just, don't waste a week doing that, but what if you spend a day each year doing that? It's like, so where are you spending your time? You could even do a larger version of that, get a paper plate out and say, how am I spending my time? If you sleep 8 hours, it's not noble to say I sleep 5 if you sleep 8. And if you want to sleep 9, great. So sleep in a little bit. But put that 9 hours in there and then say, well, then I do work. And you say if it's 8 hours a day, like don't fudge and say 8 if you're really doing it for 10. Just like don't be noble, be accurate. And then do that and then say, how much time am I spending with the people or the friends or the family that I love? And then be accurate about what that is. And then once you figure out what your paper plate looks like that, how you spend a day, give it to somebody that you love and trust and have them say, how do you think I spend my day? And compare their plate with your plate and say, is there any, do I have a different view of what's going on than the people around me? And what usually separates one plate from the other is all the distractions. That's why the plates look different. Because you're thinking you're with the family. You're thinking, no, I'm with everybody. But actually, you're distracted reading emails. So that's why their plate has a different slice of pie. Because we don't think you were with us. We think you were still at work. I think doing something like that, and not to hold each other accountable, but hold each other close. Because if you've been held close, you get both. And so to do a simple exercise, get the paper plates out, ask a couple people you know. And there are people that are safe. People don't want to beat you up. They're not going to hit you over the head with the plate. What they're going to do is they're going to say, oh, wow, I saw it differently. And gosh, I've got some stuff to learn too. And just that's a great conversation to have. And what you'll do is you'll uncover the distraction.
Yeah, let's go back to legacy. What are you and Maria thinking about in terms of legacy? This is the second or third time you've been on the podcast here, and I'm thinking about our previous conversations, and it sort of brings me to this question to say, Bob, at this phase of your life, this stage of your life, what are you thinking about in terms of building and shifting resource and time and energy and relationships? What embodies the house called legacy these days?
Yeah, well, we each get about 27,383 days. Less if you eat Pop-Tarts, but that's what you kind of like, that's what you got, average person. And so at 65, saying I'm playing the back nine is being overly generous. I think I might be on the 17th, somewhere in a sand trap. And so what I want to do is I want to leave behind some things. So that's why we spend time starting up schools and starting other things. Can we be wind under somebody else's wings? You brave Ugandans teaching and leading in Uganda, and Somalis and people in Burkina Faso and Iraq and all that. So we want to create those systems and institutions and whatever structures need to happen so that people can thrive. And I love using whatever small influence that's out there to do that. So that would be the legacy. Like that guy was always off on three. If he wasn't talking about giraffes, he was talking about this or that, or it wasn't just silly stuff. But then you'd look around and you go like, wow, there's some stuff that's up and going and viable. I would want to leave a legacy of viability. In other words, when you spin something up, then you don't set everybody up to have to get money and do fundraisers. We do one fundraiser every 20 years. Isn't that crazy? We did one in 2003 in Tacoma, and we gave away all the money we said, we'll just give it away. So if you're needy, let me know. We'll just give it away. And so that was that fundraiser. Then we did one in 2023, and we'll do the next one in 2043. Isn't that awesome? There's just a lot of nonprofits that need funding every year. And so it just seemed lame that we should have a fundraiser. We'll just do it once every 20 years. And then we'll just, at the 20-year one, we'll just try to make it really good. So I would say just being non-conventional, having a new camera angle on a familiar set of objectives, that would be the legacy I'd want to have.
That's so good. What's your favorite flavor of Pop-Tarts?
Oh, they're all tied for first in my heart and in my colon. Yes.
Yeah. I think we've talked about this before. you like Pop-Tarts, and there was another something
Those
we talked about
sprinkles
before.
are pretty, Dippin' Dots, Pop-Tarts. This is why I'm probably on the green on the 18th.
Okay, Bob, so I love this quote from you. If we only do what we're familiar with, we might miss what we've been made for. I want to talk about learning how to take better risks, how to get better at taking risks from the outset, or as some might say, even like betting on ourselves. How do we do it better, Bob?
Yeah, I think you're just constantly taking the information that you're presented with. Life has a way of pointing out what you're good at and what you're not good at yet. Sometimes you'll be permanently not good at something. So dancing would be, singing would be another. So there'll be things that I'll be permanently not good at. It doesn't mean that I abandon it, but just the feedback that I'm getting from having listened to myself and from others giving me feedback is that I'm not good at that. There's other stuff that I'm actually capable of, but I don't want us to go with what we're merely capable of. And I'm right back to saying, what are you called to? Because our capabilities can kind of wrap us around the axle. If I was just doing what I was capable of, I'd be a trial lawyer right now. And I wouldn't have started the schools or had the privilege of working alongside people that whose heart beats in that direction, because I was busy doing what I was capable of. And it definitely gets lots of feedback, whether it's economic feedback or others that say, you're good at this, we'll give you money or attention or whatever. And I'm back to just saying what is going to last. And I didn't find what I was doing. And being a lawyer can be noble and it can be not noble. But I was finding that the things that I was spending my time working on weren't lasting things to me. And so I hope they were lasting to other people. And so to continually try to pick the lock, to say, what's going to be more meaningful? What's going to be more lasting? And you need to actually develop a lock picker's touch, because you are constantly changing because you're a new creation. I'm constantly changing. But the job sometimes that we have isn't changing. So the job you got didn't change along with you. And because you constantly were evolving, then it wasn't that it was a bad job. It just wasn't a good fit for you. It was great on the day you got it. It didn't great down the road. And so instead of vilifying somebody or saying you're keeping me down or you're this or that, just say, hey, I moved on. Like, I just moved on, or the job moved on. Something moved on, and then switch it up. But to do it gracefully. You don't need to like have a big kerfuffle around it. Just say like, yeah, that's the way it works. Let me develop my lockpicker's touch and find the next thing. What is it that lights me up? What's my unique contribution? How can I, in the words of a guy named Paul, fan the flames of this unique gift that you've been given? And just keep fanning those flames.
That's good. Bob, it's so good to chat with you again. I want to land here. You've got a brand new book out right now. Just give us the flyover of what that is.
Oh, yeah. The latest book is called Catching Whimsy. I think I want to return to some of the things that initially were meaningful to you. Faith guide your steps. I want to tap you on the shoulder and say, remember when it wasn't so crazy? And I want to do that by telling stories. I don't think we need more information. I think we need more examples, as we've talked about that. The idea of just remind. So hopefully you'd find just a tap on the shoulder in some of the stories that are in there to say, I remember what it was like when relationships weren't as complicated. I remember what it was like to start out on something big. I know the difference between getting set up for something or kind of undermined. And I remember those times where I felt like I was undermined. And so I'm going to look for virtue in those things. I want to have a conversation with Diogenes if I could. What would he say about that? So the hope with Catching Whimsy, the book, is that people would be reminded daily of the different camera angles and then how God just sees us and we are his beloved. He's just nuts about us. And I think it isn't just blowing sunshine at people. I just think God doesn't grimace when he looks in our direction. He sees some people that are shuffling their feet forward. They're making mistakes. We're having setbacks. We're also having some delightful times and some great, just kind of like cry. You're laughing so hard, just belly laughing. And then there'll be some times where you just feel gutted by indecision or, having somebody let you down. And So I just want us to remind us to stay on track. All these things we've talked about, the scaffolding in your life, the betrayals that have happened, the things that you're hoping for, and to fail trying. And I want those reminders to tap us on the shoulder. And that was the idea of writing Catching Whimsy.
Bob, thank you so much. You always give us a long tail on all of your ideas, so I'm going to go back and listen again. But it's always great to see you. Thanks for being here again. Anything else today?
No, that's it. Thanks for having me on. Go take the rest of the day off.